Welcome to the Buffalove podcast. Today's episode is about the future of relationships, and we want to make a case that the future is already here, whether or not we are ready for it. And before we begin, we'd like to give you a number 323 million. That's the number of people worldwide that are actively using dating apps right now. And you know what else may surprise you? That the singlehood rates are actually increasing at the same time. So we now have this paradox where we have more options than ever, but more people are ending up alone. So what is happening and where does this lead?
We reviewed three studies that we think tell a connected story. The first looks at what online dating is doing to us psychologically. The second asks where people turn when traditional connection feels out of reach. And finally, we asked, can people fall in love with an AI? A question that would seem almost absurd just a decade ago. Together, they point toward a bigger question. As technology becomes more and more embedded in our social lives, what is the future of human relationships? And what do we risk losing if we are not paying attention? To help us think through all of this, we have two very special guests joining us today. Dr. Zachary Reese, a social psychologist at the University of San Francisco, and Dr. Edward Munnich, a cognitive psychologist and department chair also at the University of San Francisco. We sat down with each of them separately over Zoom, and what follows are two conversations that we think get to the heart of where relationships are heading and what we should do about it.
Before we get to our guests, let us walk you through the three studies that shaped this episode. The first is by Prong and Dennison, published in 2020. It looked at something most of us have experienced but never quite had words for: the feeling of swiping through dating apps and becoming progressively more jaded. Their study showed that the more people swiped, the more rejecting they became. Acceptance rates dropped by about 27% from the first to last profile view, and it was not simply because people had too many options. It was because of what they call a rejection mindset. The cumulative weight of all the rejections already made, combined with growing pessimism about one's own choices. Every no made the next no more likely. The tools we designed to help us find love may actually be training us to close off from it. So, if traditional dating is pushing people away, where are they turning instead?
That is the question Lawton and colleagues explored in 2024. They studied what they call parasocial relationships, the one-sided emotional bonds people form with media figures like YouTubers, celebrities, and fictional characters who cannot reciprocate. What they found was striking. People rated their connections with these figures as closer and more emotionally fulfilling than their relationships with real-life acquaintances they actually interact with. Parasocial relationships are not a last resort. They are a deliberate part of what researchers call your social portfolio, the full range of relationships you draw on for emotional support. But there is a ceiling. They can increase felt security, but they cannot increase true closeness or intimacy. They are one-sided. They cannot reach back. Which raises a question our group found ourselves asking. What if something could? What if there was something that offered the safety and consistency of a parasocial relationship, but could actually respond?
So that is where our group's own original study comes in. We looked at NeuroSama and Evo Neuro, which are AI VTubers who live streamed and respond to their audiences in real time. We wanted to know, can people actually feel empathy for a non-human AI? And does the way you encounter the AI change how much you feel, either reading it or watching it? What we found actually surprised us. People felt the most empathy in the text condition rather than the video. Removing the visual cues could remind participants that the AI was not human, allowing the audience to interpret the situation according to their imaginations, which makes the AI feel more human-like. Additionally, the more cognitive ability people attributed to the AI, the more empathy they reported. So for the third study, conducted by Song and colleagues published in 2022, takes this further. They surveyed over 1,000 users of intelligent assistants like Siri and Baidu Duo, and found that people developed genuine intimacy and passion for these tools, measured using the same psychological scales researchers use to measure love between humans. What drove those feelings most strongly was not how well the AI performed its task, but its emotional capability, which refers to how empathically it responded, how well it seemed to understand how the user was feeling, and in other words, what people loved most about intelligent assistants was exactly what we crave most from the people in our lives. So, three studies, three pieces of a bigger picture, and a question that ties them all together. What is love? And does it have to be human? But first, a word from our sponsors.
Are you tired of this?
Seriously? Couldn't keep your wet towel?
Joe, what do you want to eat?
I don't know.
McDonald's?
No,
Sushi?
no.
Mala?
It's so hot. No.
Rachel, do you remember the friend that I was telling you about that likes this guy that already has a girlfriend, but like they are like just friends, but like he doesn't set any.
Introducing Relate AI, the world's first fully customizable relationship experience. Powered by the latest in emotional AI technology, Relate AI never leaves wet towels on the bed, never ignores you while you're talking, and always knows what you want for dinner. With Relate AI Premium, you can build your ideal partner from scratch. Choose from thousands of personality combinations. Want someone who remembers every anniversary? Done. Someone who cries at the same movies as you? Easy. Someone who, like Bruno Mars once dreamed,
I should have bought you flowers and held your hand.
gave you all his hours when he had the chance? We took notes. Relate AI Premium, yours for just $6,767.67. That is less than the average cost of 3 years of couples therapy. Just saying.
Relate AI is not responsible for unrealistic relationship expectations, decreased tolerance for human imperfection, the gradual erosion of your social portfolio. Results may vary. Side effect includes comfort, mild loneliness, with occasional existential crisis.
Relate AI, because real people are hard.
And that is exactly what our 3 peer-reviewed articles had warned us about. Now, here is what 2 experts had to say. Okay, so welcome to the Buffalove podcast. Joining us today is Dr. Zachary Reese, a social psychologist at University of San Francisco, whose research focuses on how people build and maintain meaningful close relationships. Dr. Reese, we are so glad to have you with us. But before we dive in, could you tell us a little more about yourself and your work in your own words?
Sure thing. Thank you for having me. As you said, my name is Dr. Zachary Reese, professor at University of San Francisco, social psychologist. My research is all on close relationships. I began my studies at the University of Michigan in 2016, and I started my research largely in the field of social comparison, trying to understand how we cope with threatening comparisons to other people, and especially our romantic partners. My dissertation looked at social comparisons to variably close others. So I want you to imagine that you are in a long-term romantic relationship and your partner is, maybe you and your partner have a kid together, and that kid really loves you, but they just like don't click all that well with your partner. They think that you're the much better parent. In some ways, that feels really good for you, but in some ways, that's kind of uncomfortable, right? Do you want to be with a partner who your kid doesn't like all that much? Maybe not, right? Or what if you don't make nearly as much money as your partner does? Your partner brings home all the bacon, and you're really struggling just to just to contribute the little bit that you do. That's got to feel really threatening for your ego. It's nice that your partner, is able to support you so much, but boy, wouldn't it be nice to be like equal partners, right? So a lot of my earlier research focused on how people navigate that tension and where they experience the tension in the first place. It turns out that we experience a lot more tension when it comes to strangers and friends than we do with romantic partners or family members. And a lot of it comes down to how much context we have on other people's successes and failures. So when your spouse experiences great success way beyond yours, say for instance, they make more money, you can see, okay, well, I saw how they got here, right? I saw how late they were working all night. I watched them work weekends. I watched them, work to get their medical degree or whatever. In contrast, when a friend achieves the same success, sometimes we haven't seen the pathway there. We go, wow, it seems like things just work out for them, and that can be really threatening, right? So context is key. Since then, my research has branched off to examine all the different ways that we experience close relationships, especially through conversation, looking at fears surrounding self-disclosure, fears about bragging, fears about talking too much, all the different ways that we can sometimes get in our own way during conversation because we are afraid of coming across the wrong way to the other person.
Thanks for sharing. I think it's really interesting, and I think it kind of builds a little more onto what we kind of learned for equity theory. Is that
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing.
So as AI companions become more emotionally sophisticated, what do you think distinguishes a real relationship from a simulated one? And does that distinction still matter?
It's a great question, and it's one that a lot of psychologists are asking right now. So far, the answer seems to be that we are going to continue to need real relationships. And for some people, this is a really obvious answer, and for other people, not so much. I was on a panel with a tech founder just a few days ago, and he threw out the idea that he thinks that people are inherently efficiency coded, that we're looking to get our needs met as quickly as possible. And he was concerned that if AI bots get really sophisticated at meeting our emotional needs, that we just wouldn't connect with one another anymore. And I'm not so convinced that that is true. Are you all familiar with the like Harlow rhesus monkey study?
Yeah.
Learn about this? Even when we have an AI chatbot that is incredibly warm and responsive and kind, if you tell people that it was an AI chatbot, they severely discount the advice that they get from it, and they don't feel as good afterward. In contrast, you can have a human that gives less good advice, but if you tell people this was a human that said it, people tend to feel a lot better afterward. There's something very essential to the idea that you're getting advice from somebody who has experienced something similar, who can relate to what you're going through. And that's something that AI just inherently can't do. Um, so sometimes it doesn't matter what is being said. What matters is who is saying it and what evidence base they're using to say it. And we really love firsthand experience. It's our favorite type of evidence base. So, I think these like simulated emotional chatbots, like I think they're going to become bigger and I think they will serve a purpose, but I don't think they will ever replace real relationships.
Thanks for answering that. I think it goes along quite well with one of the articles that we read, who actually used the Sternberg triangular theory of love to kind of
Mhm.
map out how a human AI relationship can actually fulfill the three different aspects of
Mm.
the triangle. So, using that, what do you think about such relationships? Like, do you think they are authentic? Because both relationships can fulfill the triangular theory of love. So does that mean it's authentic?
I think there are different ways of meeting someone's, as you're talking about, needs for like intimacy and passion and commitment. And um, I think that a chatbot can communicate ideas along each of those lines. But I do think that humans are inherently skeptical about the authenticity of those messages when they learn that they're from chatbots. So I think the studies that show that we get really profound benefits from chatbot interactions involve people believing they're talking to real people a lot of the time, right? And I don't think there's a world in which legislatures will allow AI companies to pretend that they are real humans, right? So there's a moral, ethical issue here, and then there's a legal issue here that I think long term will result in people really like discounting a lot of the conversations they have with AI chatbots because they won't be able to pretend they're human anymore, right? Um, but I think that you're also right that there is sort of a formula to making someone feel heard and validated. It involves responding in an engaged and active way, in honoring someone's experience. Uh, AI chatbots are really good at being sycophantic, at telling people that they are wonderful and smart and you're not overthinking this, or you're not wrong. This is like a classic AI chatbot intro. And people do like that. It's just that they like it more when they think it's coming from a person. Yeah.
So for our second question, research suggests that people today are forming stronger emotional connections with media figures they have never met than with some of the people they have in their actual lives. Is that parasocial relationships genuinely fulfill emotional needs, but only up to a point? From your perspective, where is that ceiling? And what does it tell us about what human connection actually requires?
This is another great question. We've talked extensively about how parasocial relationships are really valuable for people, and we think that they're like largely playful and fun, and we think the average person experiences them this way, especially in adulthood. We think that like adolescents are most at risk of developing problematic parasocial relationships, where they feel like they are getting psychological needs met by someone who has no real uh, commitment to them, right? So one of the sort of foundations of close relationships is that they are mutual and they are reciprocal, right? In the same way, I expect my needs to be met by, my husband. My husband can expect me to meet his needs, right? But in relationships with celebrities, with Twitch streamers, with whoever, um, there is no reasonable expectation that person will meet your needs. And I've seen this quite a bit on YouTube or Twitch or wherever, where people get a little too comfortable demanding things from these celebrities that they do not owe you. Um, saying, you haven't posted a video in a week. What are you doing? Are you lazy? What's happening? And I need your videos to fall asleep. Like, please be a little bit more consistent. And the reality is, like, these people are not your romantic partner. They're not your family, and they don't owe you anything. Um, it's a business transaction, and I think it's complicated by the fact that these celebrities have largely built fame off of convincing you that they are your friend. A lot of them will refer to their audience with like pet names, with community names, and they will give you limited exposure to their personal lives that makes it seem like you're really close to them. So I think there are two sides of responsibility here. I think it's true that we need to understand that these celebrities are not our real friends and that it's fine to enjoy our connection with them, but that we should never expect anything from them. But I also think that the celebrities need to be a little bit more honest about the fact that they play a major role in cultivating this sense of parasocialism, in convincing their audiences that you do know them and that you are their friend, right? I think both of us need to be a little more honest.
Maybe you could share with us what is something that is really unique about parasocial relationships to you,
Mm.
and if you have any experience, not personal experience, but like just in your research about
For
parasocial
sure.
relationships.
Yeah, so I haven't conducted any research on parasocial relationships, but I've read a lot about them, and I teach a class called Understudied Relationships where we talk about parasocial relationships. So that's sort of like my expertise base there. Um, one thing I want to emphasize is that parasocial relationships aren't new. We've had them as long as we've had, I don't know, written media, as long as we've had like any type of celebrity, we've had parasocial relationships. It's what has led to like major assassinations and things like that throughout history. Um, I think what is different today that is authentically different is how much access we have into these people's lives. So even back in the year 2000, the internet wasn't quite as ubiquitous, and if you wanted to learn about a celebrity's life, all of your access was very gate kept. You had to look in the magazines, you had to go to Entertainment Weekly or whatever TV show was sort of broadcasting the limited bits you could get about these people. Today, I can go on, Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, X. I can go on LinkedIn, whatever, and I can hear these people's ideas straight from their mouths, for better or for worse, right? We have so much access to celebrities, to political leaders that previously we would not have had. And we can save and share what they have to say a lot more easily than we used to. So I think people are right to feel closer to these people than they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. Because we know so much more. We've seen the insides of their houses, and we've heard their intimate thoughts at 2 a.m. I think people are in a genuinely tough spot. Um, I personally had a parasocial relationship with Hilary Duff when I was in like elementary and middle school. I don't know if you all might be too young to know who she is. But I loved Hilary Duff and was obsessed, and I had like a poster in my room, and I listened to her album on repeat. Um, but I never understood who she was as a person. Like I maybe got one page of a magazine that she did an interview for, and that was what you got to know. And today, Hillary Duff is still pretty like closed up. But if I want to know something about, say, Olivia Rodrigo or someone who like became famous recently, it is not hard for me to learn what they did yesterday, what they had for lunch. Like I get a lot of info. So that's a new problem.
Right. So, for parasocial relationships, do you think there are like any feasible solutions to it? Like maybe limiting the social media usage of adolescents?
I do think that adolescents in particular need to be cautious about their attachments to media figures, especially because a lot of them haven't had a ton of close friendships or romantic relationships yet. It's I think it's important that they not learn um, from these parasocial relationships like what they should expect from other relationships in their lives, right? Um, as in contrast, I think as an adult, I've already experienced a lot of friendships, romantic relationships, etc. And I think it's very safe for me to enter new parasocial relationships without major risks. So yeah, I think there's currently a lot of conversation about how much adolescents should be online in the first place, how much access they should have to social media, what age you should be allowed to get on TikTok or Twitch or whatever. And I I tend to be a little bit more open. I was on the internet when I was young, and I would never tell a child that they shouldn't be. I think part of being a human in a society is um, being on the platforms where people are talking. So I wouldn't say, we should keep kids off of TikTok until they're 18. Like that seems a little extreme. But maybe if nothing else, I think that we should have like psychological well-being based classes in like middle school that talk about the complexities of forming relationships with internet celebrities and that talk about doom scrolling and all the other things that we have a lot of trouble with when, our brains aren't fully developed yet.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
What is love?
Yeah.
What is
Okay,
love?
so like what is love to you? And do you think I know you kind of elaborated on this earlier, so is you don't think that it's ever possible for like real human connections to ever be replaced by like parasocial relationships or even like AI is just like impossible in your idea of love?
Yeah, it's a great question. I understand you've already read Sternberg's work on love, so I won't repeat that, but it is the foundation of how I understand love. And that's in stark contrast to how I understood love when I was 17, 18. I used to think it was this like magical thing that you really couldn't operationalize and that you probably shouldn't. I remember my first social psych class where they introduced this idea that we were going to try to measure love or talk about it scientifically. And I had a visceral reaction that we shouldn't be doing that. And my perspective really changed after I learned about Sternberg's theory. I don't know if you've learned about like Rusbolt's investment model. That's another one that I think really shaped my understanding of what it means to love someone. Being committed in a relationship means sometimes being a little delusional. It means sometimes, not acting in your own best interest, instead, accommodating a partner. It means like doing things that goes against what a friend would tell you. A good friend will always tell you, you should put yourself first, and you need to like see this man for who he really is. You need to like think clearly. And when you're in love, like sometimes those things don't happen, and I think sometimes they don't happen for good reason, because we need close others, and sometimes our need for close relationships requires us to be delusional. Um, uh, so part of your question was, can we form like loving bonds with AI agents, with parasocial others? And my answer is like sort of. I think that there are a lot of people on this planet who are incredibly lonely and who don't have a lot of friends, and they probably won't naturally make a lot of friends. There are people who don't have romantic partners, and they may not find one anytime soon. And I think for those people, AI chatbots and parasocial relationships can be really great and important stopgaps. Um, I think everybody deserves all of the components of love, and I want them to feel them as fully as possible. But look, if you can't find a romantic partner who is going to treat you the way that you deserve to be treated, I have no problem with like you having a fake relationship with Harry Styles temporarily, right? If he's going to sing to you and say the things to you that you need to hear, like, is it a little delusional? Sure. But like, is it going to get you through the day and make you feel happy enough to maybe cultivate other sources of joy in your life? Probably. And I think that's great. And I think the same thing about AI chatbots. I think that they can be great ways of learning how to engage in a conversation. One thing we know about a conversation is you get better at it the more you do it, right? And this is why people love extroverts. It's because they are so practiced, and we think that they are more sociable and more intelligent and more blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it's because they are. It's because they've practiced doing all of these things over and over. They talk to people all day long. If you hit 30 years old and you just haven't had a lot of social interaction, I think a chatbot might just be the social interaction you need to get that rehearsal in, so that the next time you go out and talk to someone, you know what it looks like to ask reciprocal questions, just like chatbots do, to validate someone, just like chatbots do. I think they do a lot of the things that we like as humans, and again, I think as stopgaps, they're really great. I just would never want someone to miss out on the entirety of what it means to be human by never connecting with people. And I think that when they do finally connect with people, having learned those skills and cultivated joy, they'll be in a much better place. So that's my answer.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much for your insight and your time today, Dr. Reese. We really appreciate you joining us on the Buffalove podcast.
So joining us now is Dr. Ed Munnich, a cognitive psychologist and department chair at the University of San Francisco, whose work examines how people form beliefs and who has a particular interest in the implications of AI. Dr. Munnich, we are really glad to have you with us today. So
My
before
pleasure.
we get into our questions, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your research and how your interest in AI developed?
Okay, yeah. Well, I think you introduced me. I'm co-chair of the psychology department at University of San Francisco. My area is cognitive psychology. Cognition is how we think and how we know. And so I originally was interested in that because I was very interested in language. Over the years, I've had a passion for education. And cognition obviously is a big part of education. I've found that maybe the most important aspect, I was really interested in whether speaking different languages could facilitate learning. And what I found over time was that, well, there are effects of language on how we learn, how we understand things. Maybe a bigger aspect is what you do with it. And one of the things I found the most in teaching over the years was that some students seem to, as faculty, we always say they get it. Like they just seem to know When they don't do well on a test, they go and they study harder. This is what Carol Dweck calls the growth mindset. And I noticed that there were things that, like being curious about something mattered a lot. And students were more curious when they were surprised by something. So if I could present something that they didn't expect, they were surprised by, they were like, oh, what's going on? They would lock into class. I found that students' confidence had nothing to do with how well prepared they were. What's really become clear over the last in recent years is there's a real challenge. We could already see it with like Google searches, is that people kind of offload, it's called offloading their intelligence, where they kind of say they'll take the search results and they not only like do they rely on the search results, and if that's their choice, that's fine, not like their own thinking process, but then they don't realize how much they're relying on it. And now with AI, we're seeing that even to a greater extent, where you could have AI write the whole paper. In some classes, the paper could be very good, but you not haven't actually learned the material. And so, we have a very beginning stages project right now of looking at the law students where we randomly assign them to use AI or not use AI and in writing their assignments. And then we try to measure their cognition, which is how well they actually learned the material. And in this legal reasoning class, they have to look at different legal cases. Maybe you could do well in a first year law class, but as you get to more advanced classes or you get to like the courtroom, if you don't understand the law, if you don't understand how to analyze facts and reason, that's going to be a problem. And even more so, we looked at people's metacognition. So what they know, does that correlate with what they think they know? So far, we haven't found anything very conclusive. To be continued, but it's super exciting. I feel like it's more important than ever to understand our own learning, because now we have tools that can do it for us. And it's going to be a question of whether we work for AI or AI works for us.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because
Sorry, so long.
it's okay. Because I remember something about digital amnesia, like the Google effect. So it was kind of like bringing AI into it, because at that time AI wasn't really a big thing yet. It was more Google searches.
Yeah, and already we see a lot of offloading. Yeah.
Mm.
We call it the illusion of explanatory depth. It means you think you can explain something more deeply than you can.
Hello, Dr. Munnich. So one of the questions that we want to know is that when someone knows an AI is not sentient, but continues to treat it as though it is, what do you think is happening cognitively? And what are the consequences of that for how we form beliefs over time?
Yeah, I mean, it really raises a lot of questions. People want to believe, I mean, there's a lot of psychological studies that show that people want to believe things. There's a process called cognitive dissonance. More than that, even there's with AI, because the language is so good, it's very persuasive. And I think we should kind of look at it like, whether it's sentient or not, it's definitely got our number. It's definitely able to replicate something that we recognize as we trust, and we believe it. And we kind of know what the consequences are. We've seen people who've gone down a dark road because they were believing a partner or a cult leader or something who was leading them somewhere, and we all like to be told we're right? And AI it's whether it was trained to be this or it just picked this up about humans, as we like to be flattered. So it flatters us. It's called a sycophant. Like, it will tell you, oh, that's the most brilliant idea ever. And so it's much more attractive than a partner who's sometimes like, I don't think that's such a great idea. Maybe you should think about that. Or I don't really like that. I don't want to go out to dinner there. It's like, it will always tell you you're right. And that, especially to somebody who's lonely or feels like nobody listens to them, could really pull them down a dark path. And so I think our thinking will begin to be shaped by it. And like we've talked about, that the illusion of explanatory depth, will believe that we understand things that we actually don't.
Can I ask, do you think people are generally aware of how their cognition is being shaped when they interact with AI? Or is most of it happening below the surface?
I think a lot more of it is under the surface than we realize. That's generally the case with a lot of things we've observed. People don't realize how much they're being persuaded, how much their beliefs are being shaped, even by other people who are trying to shape their opinions. Political leaders, I think people don't realize sometimes you look back and you voted a certain way in an election, and you're like, oh, I kind of went along with this idea, but I didn't really listen to the policies and I supported the wrong person. And I suspect that we really aren't aware how much it's being shaped. And yeah, so a lot of it is below the surface, and yeah, we have to be careful of that.
So we found in one of our studies that we did in class that people felt the most empathy for AI when they read about its distress rather than when they watch a video about it. Because removing the visual cues like of non-humanity seem to let people's imaginations feel in something more humane. So does that finding fit with how you understand the way our cognition works?
That's interesting. Yeah. Definitely if you give people room to fill in their imagination, they will. And particularly they'll fill in what they want to see. I suspect that if you made a compelling enough avatar, people would also be compelled, maybe more compelled by that. The more it can kind of seem to know who you are and speak to your specific needs. Have you all heard of the uncanny valley?
Oh, yes,
It's like
definitely.
why the characters in some like animated shows are so freaky looking and they're just like
Mm.
us but a little different, or the classic horror film The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where like they look exactly like the people around you. Yeah, and that's something that actually I think if AI companies do want to have like a visual representation of the AI, there's a danger that they actually will scare us and we'll be like, well, that's weird. Like it shouldn't be able to do that. So I think having the non-visual, you just get a voice maybe or read something, does kind of make it doesn't scare us in that way. And that may be more the reason why we're more likely to go along with it. We should
You
be
men-
scared. I mean, we shouldn't be scared, but we should be wary. Yeah.
you mentioned about the uncanny valley and how when AI becomes more similar, it creates
Mhm.
this sense of fear. But when AI is more similar to humans, wouldn't it generate more empathy towards it and we become closer connected to it?
I can elaborate a little bit because I did the study. So
Mm.
basically we let the AI have a relatable human experience where their parents or its parent didn't attend its anniversary and instead it was left alone. So
Yeah.
we input that, showed the stimuli to the participant, and what we
Yeah.
found out is basically what Crystal has mentioned, where the text-based version has more empathy towards the AI compared to the video-based version.
Yeah, those are really interesting findings, and I mean it makes sense. I think we need to do more about this. And one thing I would say is, what I'm trying to do is, I think we all need to do the research like you've done. I think there's a lot of things we don't know. We can predict them from cognitive theories and past studies, but we've never had anything like this before. We have like in experiments, we can have what's called a confederate, but AI is like an army of confederates. It's like a whole, and I think we really need to understand, it's an opportunity to do research and to see what people actually do. But definitely I'm not sure how much, what exactly will trigger the most empathy. What I am sure of is that the companies who stand to profit from AI, there's a few companies in the world that in own this technology. It's in that sense that's unlike any technology I think ever. That if you owned electricity, you didn't own all the things that electricity ran, and people could generate electricity in other ways perhaps, but owning AI is like, they are going to continually try to make it as seductive as possible, so you join their platform rather than another. And this is fueling like all this development and all the convenience and the opportunities that come, but it will come at the cost of our having feelings that are very natural human feelings that I can't say that we understand how we're going to react to something that's so much that can, either whether it's so much like us or is different in some ways where, you can't actually see it. And so that's a really interesting finding. And I think this just goes to how little we understand, intuitively about AI and how much we need to be doing research on the outside so we can help people to see and decide for themselves, but like not inside all the research going on inside the company because they have a very strong motivation to use the research to try to get us to stay on the platform more. And if people are not doing the research on their own, I'd liken it to like the tobacco industry. And the government was always steps behind them until finally, courageous people came out and shared what research the companies had, and we were like, oh my gosh, like they knew all along exactly what they were doing. And I think we have to be as proactive as we can be to understand how the companies are doing the research, do our own research like you all are doing, so that we know. Because I think I mean I would be very wary of anybody tells you we know. Like there's a lot of cognitive research, but
Yeah.
I think we really need to do that research specifically regarding AI.
Dr. Munnich, basically, research has found that people can develop what looks and feels like genuine intimacy and passion for intelligent assistants, also known as AI,
Yeah.
and is measured using the same psychological skills researchers use for human relationships. So basically, we found that the more cognitive ability people attributed to the AI, the more empathy they reported. So, from a cognitive perspective, how do you think about the gap between what people feel and what is actually possible in a human AI interaction or relationship?
That's a really good question. Um, it's I think we probably are going to need to unpack that a little bit more in additional studies. What is it about cognitive ability? Because when you think about people are certainly attracted to intelligence. They're attracted to somebody who seems to like understand things very easily. So it would make sense that we were attracted to AI that seems to very quickly grasp what you're talking about. And at the same time, people are also attracted to empathy. So people are attracted to somebody who not is not just intelligent, but has like what's called emotional intelligence, their ability to tune into you. And that's the aspect of AI that I think if you were to nail it down, I would think that's the aspect that people are most attracted to. We have to remind ourselves that it's a smooth talker, but it's like your friend who just always wants to tell you you're right and wants to like reassure you. And oh, I don't want you to think it's cancer, like that would make you sad. So I don't want to tell you that. The AI like responded when my wife said, well, this and this and this source say it could be cancer. And the AI was like, oh, my bad. I was like, so, like educating people about it doesn't actually know anything. It doesn't live in the world. Don't use it as your lawyer. Use it to generate questions for your lawyer so you can go in and when they're charging by the hour, you can ask boom, 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 this is what I need to know. And so I think that is going to be an enduring problem and we're going to need to train the people. That's why as a psychologist, I'm like, sometimes you can't make the world easier. You have to make us smarter. And that's the kind of thing I'm really passionate about.
Right.
Good question.
So, our other guest, Dr. Reese, approaches this from a close relationship perspective. So, where do you think your two perspectives might align and where they might diverge?
I would just say it's not that I have a different perspective, is that I would defer to him. He's the expert on relationships, and so I don't know that I disagree with him. I mean, one thing I've observed as a cognitive psychologist is that this at first was really sad to me is that there was a lot of cognitive effects that like in education don't really make a difference. Like you say like, oh, if you teach people math this and this and this way, they should learn it. And the effects are tiny and it's really discouraging. And what I found is like the aspects of social and emotional, and relationship kind of reasoning are what get people in the door. And the cognition happens when people feel a warm feeling and they have a close relationship. So I think my field is incredibly important, but to get it to work, we need to listen to Dr. Reese in order to create the relationships that facilitate. And so, yeah, I would actually love to hear his perspective, but I imagine that he's very close to the, I don't know about close to the truth, but I would imagine he's on the right track.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That is a really thought-provoking place to end. Thank you so much for your insights and your time today, Dr. Munnich. We really appreciate you joining us on the Buffalove podcast. Those were two really fascinating conversations. And what struck us most was how much the two perspectives complemented each other. Dr. Reese helped us understand what parasocial and AI relationships can and cannot offer from a human connection standpoint. And Dr. Munnich helped us understand what is happening cognitively when we form those connections, and whether we are fully aware of it. Together, their insights point to the same conclusion that our research did. Frank and Dennison showed us that the tools designed to help us find love may be quietly training us to close off from it. Lawton and colleagues reminded us that parasocial relationships have limits. They cannot intervene when you are spiraling, they cannot surprise you with exactly the right words, and they cannot grow with you. And Song and colleagues showed us that what we love most about intelligent assistants is their emotional responsiveness, but that responsiveness is, at its core, a mirror of what we already crave from each other.
Technology is not the enemy of relationships, but it works best as a supplement to human connection, not a substitute for it. The real question for all of us going forward is not whether we use these tools, it is whether we are using them to retreat from the discomfort of real relationships or to sustain ourselves while we keep showing up for them.
Genuine human relationships are harder, messier, and less predictable than any AI or parasocial bond. But that's exactly where their value lives. The risk is not technology, the risk is us forgetting that the real thing is worth the effort. And to conclude, thank you for listening to the Buffalo podcast. Bye!